Hey guys, and welcome back. So in the previous nugget, we had just learned some of the very basic Linux CLI fundamentals that is going to allow us to, well, basically navigate and move around the Linux file system. Now that we have this under our belt, what I want to talk to you about here is something called peripherals. Now, peripherals are basically just devices which are connected to your computer. Now, in today's day and age, probably the most well-known and most widely used peripheral would be a USB stick. You know, it's not part of your computer, but you can attach it into your computer, and you could use that for some type of storage, or perhaps maybe loading an operating system from that USB. Ultimately, you're doing this peripherally. Now, like I say, USB sticks, everyone probably knows what a USB stick is in this day and age. But what I also want to talk about is maybe a little bit more of an older concept, and that's called a PCI. This is a peripheral component interconnect. Now, this is more of a legacy type of thing. It was more common in the 90s and early 2000s. And what you could do is you could use this PCI to ultimately connect things like sound cards to your computer. Or maybe you wanted to connect a network card, or maybe some type of video card. Ultimately, you would use the PCI to connect any of these components to integrate with your computer. Now, just so we understand what we're talking about, let me just show you a quick picture. If you just search for peripheral component interconnect, if we look at images, you can see an example of this type of device. So perhaps if you have actually tinkered with building your own PC, this actually might be familiar to you. For the more casual user, a USB is certainly going to be a little bit more familiar. But like I say, if we happen to use these devices with our Linux system, we want to be able to understand what devices we actually have connected. Now, the Linux CLI actually allows us to do such a thing using something called LSPCI. Now, the Linux system is actually pretty handy when it comes to the naming of these tools. Think about it. What was the name I just said there? I said the command we could use is LSPCI. Now, if you think about it, the easy way to remember this is that we just actually learned what the ls command was. Remember, in the previous nuggets, we know that ls gives us a list. And what are we going to list? We're going to list the PCI information. So using this command, we can get a list of effectively anything that is connected via the peripheral component interconnect. So let's check out this command and see what we can find. Now, what I will say is that when it comes to things like hardware, because we are using a virtual machine, the information you get is not really the most real world, as opposed to having a real live Linux box on a computer and attaching physical devices. But nevertheless, we can still use this command on our virtual machine to understand what this actually does. So again, if we are stuck, we can always rely on the old faithful man page. We can say man lspci and hit enter. And it tells us, no surprisingly, it's going to list, i.e. ls, all the PCI devices. And again, if we hit the space bar, we can see all of these different types of options and switches that we can use. So we could do ls PCI-K. That is going to show us kernel drivers handling each devices, as well as the kernel modules capable of handling it. And you'll notice we have these options for -v and -vv and -vvv. Ultimately, what we're doing here is specifying the verbosity of the output, i.e. for every additional V, we're going to get more and more detailed information. So we'll press the Q button to quit, and we'll try out this command. We'll say lspci, and look at this right here. Now again, not the most real world environment here because this is a virtual machine, but this is allowing us to list the PCI devices here. Similarly, if we say lspci-K, we can get that kernel information. You see this? And as we can see here, we're actually getting VBox guest because again, this is a virtual machine. But nevertheless, we actually can find out this information, and if you do try this on a real live Linux machine, well, it's going to give very similar outputs. Once again though, if we want to get more verbose information, we can say lspci and then do a -v. That's a lot more information than without, but again, we can get even more verbose by doing -vv, and then finally -vvv, which is the most verbose output. So we can see all these things like the subsystem that is being used. You can see the interrupt request, information relating to the kernel driver, and modules. So really, really handy. Remember that when we want to understand the PCI, peripheral devices, LSPCI, and the various switches we have available to it, this is going to be our go-to tool. Now, to move on and to talk about something you probably are a little bit more familiar with, that is going to be a USB, again, a peripheral device. If I had to ask you, just based on what you know right now, what do you think the command to list the USB information is going to be? And if you're going to say LS, you're absolutely correct. And if you're going to say LS USB, you've got it spot on. Before we actually do this, we'll say man ls USB. And again, unsurprisingly, it's going to list the USB devices. And again, as we saw before, we have all of these options. We can do -V for more verbose information. We can do -S to specify particular devices. And this is going to come in a particular format. We specify the bus, then a colon, and then the dev number. Similarly, we can do devices specifying by vendor and product, and -V, little bit different, not verbose output, that's going to give us the version. If you find that confusing, you can just do the longer form of --verbose versus --version. So let's try to explore what we can find in the ls USB command. We'll say ls USB, hit enter, and we can see here we have some USB information. Again, the information here, not the most real world. We have some VirtualBox related information. If you're using VMware, then you should have some VMware based information. And again, to get that more verbose information, we can say ls USB -V, or to be a little bit different, we'll do --verbose, and look at this, way more information we're actually getting this time. Based though on the same information, just a little bit more talkative as the output. So we can see here, bus 001, device 001, and we have all of this information relating to the USB device. So if we do ls USB, we can see the bus and the device. If we just want to target a particular piece of information, i.e. this one right here, the top one, we can take a note of the bus and the device, as we saw within the man page. Use the S switch, specify the bus with a colon, and then the device number. So that's exactly what we'll do right now. We'll say ls USB-S, and we'll give the bus number for the first one, 001. We'll do a colon, and then we'll do 002, and this is just filtering effectively the output, and we're only getting this first device here. And what I could actually do is say -verbose to get verbose information just on this particular instance. So scroll on up, notice here that we're only getting information relating to bus 001, device 002, i.e. the VirtualBox USB tablet. Whereas if we do ls USB and we arrow up and we change this to 001, device 001, verbose, hit enter, scroll on up, we're only getting information relating to this device right here. We can also do ls blk to list block devices. So in the case here, we can see information relating to our hard disk. And Linux provides a really, well, I would say, friendly way to interact with these different peripherals. We have the ls command, and then effectively we're just specifying what do we want to list. ls USB gives us USB listings, ls PCI gives us PCI listings. So these are some of the commands that we can use as a Linux administrators to interrogate our peripheral devices. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.